Well, good morning. We're here at the 81st Precinct House in Bed-Stuy, and I'm joined by Police Commissioner Kelly, our new Chief of Department, Philip Banks, the Commanding Chief of Brooklyn North, Assistant Chief Gerald Nelson, and the Precinct Commander of the 81st, Inspector Juanita Holmes. Juanita, thank you for having us. I said to her before, she is our host. Actually, it's the taxpayers who are our hosts, but nevertheless, she represents them, and you do a great job. And thank you for everything you do.
You.
And to all the men and women of the 81st, or 81 as you would call it. Over the past 11 years, thanks to the men and women and the entire NYPD, New York City has led the nation in reducing crime. I think that's a story everybody knows. Last year, we cut murder to a new all-time low. And so far this year, it's down another 30%. And shootings are also down another 24%. That's based off of last year where we had a record. So it really is quite remarkable, the job that the NYPD and everybody else that works with them, from the public on up, is doing. We are the safest big city in the country, and we've done it not by locking more people up after they commit the crimes. In fact, we've cut the incarceration rates to record lows. We have done it by deterring people from committing crimes in the first place, and that's the most wonderful thing you can do. As a result, thousands of people who otherwise would have been murdered are alive today, and hundreds of thousands of people who would have been victims of serious crimes have been spared. But the fact is, one shooting, one murder is one too many. And as the residents of this neighborhood know, there is still far too much violent crime in our city and far too much gun violence. Since the horrific shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School nearly 4 months ago, Americans around the country have been talking about gun violence and what we should do about it. Our bipartisan coalition of Mayors Against Illegal Guns is doing everything we can to help make those voices heard in Washington, and I am hopeful that Congress will listen. But at the same time, we can't wait for Washington to act, and we have not. Our administration has mounted the nation's most comprehensive attack against illegal guns, and that includes helping to pass the toughest laws in the country against illegal possession of a loaded gun. In other cities, a conviction for illegal gun possession carries a slap on the wrist. Here in our city, it carries a 3.5-year mandatory minimum sentence. You're also more likely to be caught here than in other cities because the NYPD takes proactive steps to identify those who may be carrying guns. Those two realities combine to form a powerful deterrent, and based on the crime data, there is just no question that it is working. Today, we have more data that makes our case even stronger that we're happy to share with you. What it does is it shows the impact of strategies that our strategists have had on young people, and it really is great news for our future. What do you think? The Federal Centers for Disease Control, CDC, conducts biannual surveys of teenagers. And one of the questions they ask is, have you carried a handgun in the last 30 days? Just think about it. This is our society, and we ask these kinds of questions, but the interesting thing is the results. Back in 2001, 3.6% of New York City teens say they had carried a handgun in the past 30 days. By 2011, the most recent year the survey was conducted, that has dropped to 2.3%, and that is the lowest rate of any big city in the U.S. Even in the rest of the country, it's a very different story. In 2001, 5.7% of American teens carried handguns, and over the next decade, that dropped only to 5.1%. So in New York City, during that period, we saw a 36% drop in teens carrying handguns over the past decade, while in the rest of the country, there was only an 11% drop. And as a result, teens in the rest of the country are now more than twice as likely to carry a handgun as teens in New York City. There's no doubt that there's been a critical reason for our success in leading the nation in driving crime down. Our policies and the great job that the NYPD does. Let's take a look at New York versus other big cities, and we have a chart here, chart 1, right up here. As you can see, teens in New York City are far less likely to carry a handgun than teens in other big U.S. cities, and the difference is quite dramatic. You can see New York is way on the left at 2.3, Washington, D.C. on the right at 7.5, in the middle, Dallas, 5, Houston, 5.3, Chicago, 5.8. Let's take a look at the second chart. This is how other cities have fared over the past decade. And you can see New York has gone on the far left side from 3.6 down to 2.3, whereas Washington, D.C. has gone from 5.7 up to 7.5. Chicago's had some progress, down from 6.8 to 5.8. Philadelphia's gone up from 4.8 to 5.4. So it is across the rest of the country, no one has had the success that we have had, and no one is in as good a position as we are. Some cities that saw the increase in teens carrying a gun, some a decline, but overall it averages out to 11% drop for other cities, which is far smaller than the 36% drop that we've achieved here. This morning I met with Cleopatra Cowley Pendleton and Nathan Pendleton from Chicago. Let me remind you who they are. They are the parents of Hadia Pendleton, a 15-year-old honors student who performed with her high school band at President Obama's inauguration this past January. Just 1 week later, she was with her friends in a Chicago park, and she was shot and killed by a teenager with a gun. It was a senseless, tragic shooting, and very sadly, it's the kind of shooting that happens every day across our country. The pain in the Pendleton's voices, when I talked to them this morning, would break any parent's heart. And as the father of two daughters, it's just impossible to imagine what they're going through. But their pain is something that far too many parents have to live with every single day, including many parents here in New York City. And today we're joined by a number of New Yorkers who've had family members murdered by those carrying guns. Dion Gordon's brother Maurice was a U.S. Customs and Border Protection officer who was shot and killed outside his home in Jamaica, Queens. And Dion, I'm happy to say, is now an active supporter of Mayors Against Illegal Guns. Shani Johnson's son, Kendrick Morrow, was only 17 when he was shot and killed at a party in Springfield Gardens. Kendrick had been planning to attend St. John's, and he dreamed of becoming a doctor. Shani has spoken out on the need for tough enforcement against illegal guns. Larry and Renee Hill lost their son. Larry, when he was shot in the back on a park basketball court by a 21-year-old. Larry was only 15 years old. Mr. and Mrs. Hill are now involved in the Brooklyn North Clergy Task Force run by Bishop Gerald Seabrooks, who is also here with us today. Robin Lyde lost her son, Benny, while he was walking into his house in Crown Heights. He was 21 years old. Ms. Lyde is also now actively involved in the Brooklyn North Clergy Task Force. And Denise Pierce's daughter, Zorana Horton, was shot in the chest and killed while shielding her 11-year-old daughter from a hail of bullets outside a public school in Brownsville. An 18-year-old fired the gun that killed her. Denise is now an active member of a program started by the NYPD Brooklyn Clergy Task Force called Grandmother's Love Over Violence. The tragedies these families have experienced reflects an awful reality in our city. Too often, young people are the innocent victims of gun violence, and too often young people are also the ones doing the shooting. Today, the police department will release an annual report showing the breakdown of murders in our city. The numbers show that the median age of murder victims for 2012 was only 27 years old, and that more than a quarter of all murder suspects were between the ages of 16 and 21. So clearly, the more that we can do to keep guns out of the hands of young people, the more lives we can save. The numbers also show that the vast majority of murder victims and suspects were males. 84% of murder victims and 93% of murder suspects. And that's not surprising, in part because males are far more likely to carry guns, and that's true among teenagers as well. The CDC data I showed you earlier can be broken down by gender, and here it is on chart number 3. It shows that the rates at which teenage boys are carrying guns in major cities, and you can see that New York City is far below the others. And chart 4, here's the same chart for teenage girls, and the same is true. New York is leading the way in reducing the number of kids that are carrying guns. Now, I hope we'll all live to see the day when men commit as few murders as women and carry illegal guns as infrequently. But until then, we have to target police resources not based on gender or race or age but on crime reports. And that is exactly what we do. And that's why police activity is greatest in the area where, sadly, crime is the highest, which is in Black and Hispanic communities. In 2012, about 90% of all murder victims and suspects were black and Hispanic. And that means if we can reduce the number of murder victims by 100, we'll save 90 black and Hispanic New Yorkers. And that's basically what's happened in 2012. By having 96 fewer murders in 2012 than 2011, there are 92 black and Hispanic New Yorkers alive today who would otherwise not be. This is a problem in our society. We know where the problem is, and we have to do something about it. But the police have to go where the suspects are and stop crime before it happens, and they're doing a spectacular job. The rest of us, we have to improve education. We have to give people opportunities. We have to make sure that people understand the difference between right and wrong. But the police are doing their job, and now it's up to the rest of us to do ours for the long-term solutions to these kinds of problems. Now, there are some special interest groups and elected officials and some candidates for mayor who seem to believe that the police department should deploy its resources based on census reports rather than crime reports. If we're up to them, we'd be stopping more senior citizens than teenagers, or not stopping anyone at all. Many also support creating an inspector general to oversee the police department as a backdoor way to achieve the same result, which would undermine the police commissioner's ability to set and enforce policies and strategies. I believe we owe it to every parent in this city and every child in this city to conduct stops appropriately and based on crime reports, not based on racial or gender or age quotas. The more people we can keep from carrying guns, the more lives we can save, and the more success that we'll have keeping teenagers from making a terrible decision that they will regret for the rest of their lives. We are doing everything we can to support teens who are at risk of picking up guns. Our Young Men's Initiative, which is a $127 million public-private partnership, is working to help black and Hispanic teens stay in school and out of trouble so they can follow their dreams. And I wanted to once again thank George Soros for a wonderful gift, which I matched to fund this effort. We are seeing some very promising results, and that work goes hand in hand with the police department's work to prevent young people from engaging in crime. The numbers are in the right direction. The numbers are wonderful, but the work we still have to do is daunting, and we cannot walk away from it. Let me turn the floor over to Commissioner Kelly, who will tell you about all the other efforts we're making to keep guns out of the hands of young people. And I don't think there's any question that the police department under Ray Kelly has just done a spectacular job. You only have to look at the numbers, and hopefully they'll continue to do so. Ray?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. The CDC data confirms our success in getting guns off the street, and it's encouraging, but I can assure you that we are not going to rest on our laurels. And that's why this morning, in cooperation with the Manhattan District Attorney Cy Vance, 63 members of rival street crews in East Harlem were indicted for their involvement in the kind of retaliatory violence that's been responsible for about a third of the shootings in New York City over the last few years. The arrest took place in and around public housing developments in Manhattan, and they were part of the NYPD's new Operation Crew Cut. We believe that Operation Crew Cut is principally responsible for the reduction in shootings and murders by 24% and 30%, respectively, so far this year. Here in the 81st Precinct, shootings are down 36%, murders are down by 85%. Besides the great crime fighting of Inspector Holmes and her folks here, the 81st Precinct is also benefiting from the takedowns of street crews last year in 3 precincts that border the 81st Precinct. We think the NYPD's calculated attention to the successful interruption of violent street crews rivalries is why shooting and murders continue to fall. There's no question that street crews are generating violence. The shooting, death, and near-fatal shootings of 2 members of True Money Gang, or TMG, this is in East Harlem in 2009, resulted in spiraling tit-for-tat violence over the next 3 years. That resulted in 2 more homicides and at least 10 additional retaliatory shootings among TMG members and their rivals a few blocks away, among at least 2 other crews. Social media certainly remains a double-edged sword in our crime-fighting strategies. It is used by crew members to brag about past crimes, to taunt rivals, and to incite violence. On the other hand, we use social media to document past crimes and intercept new ones being talked about openly by crew members on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube. While the numbers of murders and shooting victims are declining dramatically, the victims and their assailants remain disproportionately young men of color. However, they are also the beneficiaries as crime plummets. As the mayor said, far fewer New Yorkers are going to prison compared to increases in incarceration nationally. And 96% of last year's record murder decline, if history is any guide, can be attributed to fewer black and Hispanic murder victims. That's good news. But there's still much more to do. And that's why we partnered early on with the Brooklyn Clergy Coalition, Bishop Seabrooks, Bishop Lyons, who's not here today, Bishop Billups, Shalom Langhorne, and so many others came together to establish the Brooklyn Clergy Coalition and other programs inside the Brooklyn Clergy Coalition, such as the Grandmother's Love Program, which Ms. Peace is such an essential member. And that's why our Juvenile Robbery Intervention Program, JRIP, has been expanded. That's why we're doubling the size of our gang division. And that's why police officers on patrol continue to stop and question individuals engaged in suspicious activity. It's one of the ways we are continuing to drive crime down to record lows. We're stepping up both enforcement and innovations to steer youth at risk from the wrong path to the right one. Job one for the NYPD is saving lives. So far, so good. But we are not done, not by a long shot. And we haven't done it alone. We've done it with the help of the kind of community leaders and clergy leaders and police officers who are here with us today. And we've succeeded because the department has been supported at every turn by the mayor. Mayor Bloomberg has been right behind us, and that's why we believe that we are the safest big city in America, and we intend to keep it that way. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you, and congratulations. These numbers are great. We obviously still have a lot more to do, and we're always going to have a lot to do. Freedom is not free, and we have to fight the threats on our streets and the threats from overseas. And the fact that the commissioner has devoted 1,000 police officers to intelligence and counterterrorism tells you how seriously we take that. And the fact that we have been safe shows that perhaps it's working as a deterrent, or in many cases where we've found suspicious activity and shut it down. The commissioner mentioned one of our community partners here, Bishop Seabrooks. Bishop, you want to say something?
First, on behalf of Bishop Lyons, we'd like to thank the mayor just for allowing us to work along with the New York City the police department to, guess what, deter crime. I'm the bishop of the Rehoboth Cathedral located in Bedford Stuyvesant, and it was 9 years ago that one of our parishioners, Larry Hill Jr., 15 years old, come from an intact family. It was an honor student playing basketball in July in the park, and there was a gang initiation. Young girl comes up to him, says something derogatory. He waves his hand. Her boyfriend comes back, and he died. He was shot in the back. We decided as a clergy, what could we do to stop the crime? And we felt because many African Americans and Hispanics were dying in our community, seeing them buried, that we had a responsibility to do something. So we met with first Chief Nelson and asked Chief Nelson to help us to, number one, get a meeting with Police Commissioner Raymond Kelly. And we went to Commissioner Raymond Kelly, and we asked for two things. Number one, how do we get the African-American community to respect the police department, and how does the police department develop a better relationship with the African-American community? And from working with Police Commissioner Kelly and all of the New York City Police Department, I want to say thank you. Thank you. I think that more African-American lives are saved. Thank you. We're seeing less African Americans buried. Thank you. And this could not have been possible except, guess what, the mayor allowed it. So on behalf of all of the clergy that are sitting here, we just want to say thank you, and you're doing a good job, and we pledge our support to you.
Thank you, and all of the clergy you, I guess, represent here right now are making an enormous difference. There's no one person that's going to solve society's problems. We all have to work together, and I think Commissioner Kelly has led the way. He started it back when David Dinkins appointed him police commissioner many years ago, and since my administration started, Ray has been the champion for making this city a safer city for everyone. Let me invite one another of the family members affected by gun violence, Denise Peace, to share her thoughts with us. Ms. Peace.
First of all, I want to say thank you for being here. I'm so glad to be here. My name is Denise Peace. I'm Joanna Horton's mother. She, oh boy, I thought I could do it, but she left 12 children, and I'm raising half, and the father is raising the rest. I want everybody to realize that, we go through so much when you lose your children. And this is not my first time. This is my third time that I lost a child of mine from gun violence. I hope everybody joins together with us and help us get through this, especially with the New York Police Department. I'm so grateful for them, and I thank them, especially the commissioner and the mayor and everybody that's here. God bless you all. Please come and help us do this, okay? Thank you.
Denise, I don't know that any of us can ever feel your pain. For us, it's we've got to do what we can, but our prayers are with you and with your family. Before we take questions on topic, let me just try to summarize for our Spanish-speaking audience. Tenemos buenas noticias sobre el número de jóvenes portando armas en nuestra ciudad. Hemos visto una gran reducción en los últimos 10 años y hay menos jóvenes portando armas que aquí que cualquier otro lugar en los Estados Unidos. Hemos trabajado para reducir el número de armas en nuestras calles y vamos a seguir trabajando para mantener la seguridad de nuestra ciudad. And with that,